Humphrey Products Company, 125th anniversary. The founding story. Before 1901, 2 sisters, 4 brothers, and a dream. Every great company has an official founding date. Ours is 1901. But the real story, the one that explains who we are and why we are still here 125 years later, begins much earlier and much farther away, with 2 sisters from the English countryside. Their names were Emma Sophia and Rhoda Priscilla Reed. They were born in the small town of Westbury in Wiltshire, England, just 2 years apart. Emma in 1829, Rhoda in 1831. The eldest daughters in a family of 9 children, they were inseparable from the start. Their grandmother used to say those 2 girls stuck together like 2 fingers in a fresh-baked pie. In the summer of 1857, Emma fell head over heels in love with a young man named George Humphreys, an enterprising fellow from Somersetshire. They married on the 2nd of July. Rhoda, characteristically, wasted no time. By January of 1858, she had married Uriah Eastman, a carpenter and engineer with big plans of his own. And the very next morning, the newlyweds departed for the outback of New South Wales, Australia. Just like that. Gone. To a continent her family had never seen. To build a life that would take years to imagine from across the Pacific. Emma and George stayed in England and began building a family of their own. 4 boys, born nearly every 2 years. Alfred Henry in 1858, Frederick John in 1860, Charles in 1862, Herbert Sidney in 1864. 4 sons in 6 years, with the energy and ambition to match. In 1868, devastating news arrived from Australia. Uriah had been killed in an accident at his lumber mill, and then, in 1871, the grief deepened. Rhoda herself died in childbirth, leaving behind 2 young daughters, Kate Ann and Susan Mary, alone in Bundarra, New South Wales, on the far side of the world. By then, George and Emma had already made their own great leap, emigrating in 1870 to Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, along with Emma's parents and 2 of her brothers. They arrived with little more than the skills in their hands. George and the boys worked as machinists and blacksmiths, taking jobs wherever they could find them. And the women of the family, Emma, her mother, and her sisters, contributed just as essentially. They sewed, cooked, laundered, knitted, and canned for other families. Word of mouth was their only advertisement, and it was enough. This is how they paid their way, town by town, city by city, on a 15-year march west that would eventually bring them to Kalamazoo, Michigan. Kate Ann and Susan Mary, Rhoda's daughters, made their own extraordinary journey to join the family. 13 and 10 years old, largely on their own, they traveled by stagecoach from Bundarra to Sydney, 4 days across the Australian outback, then boarded a steamship for San Francisco, a crossing of 97 days across 2 oceans. Their ship ran aground on an uncharted coral reef in the Pacific. They arrived in San Francisco with gold coins hidden under a pillow. They crossed the continent by train to Chicago, then on to Detroit, then by stagecoach to Hamilton. The journey took the better part of a year. They made it. When Kate Ann arrived, she met her cousins, including the eldest, Alfred Henry Humphrey. 9 years later, in 1882, Alfred and Kate married. 2 family lines, separated by oceans and years of hardship, reunited in a single moment. By the mid-1880s, the family had settled in Kalamazoo. George and his sons, Alfred, Frederick, Charles, and Herbert, were working as machinists, and their evenings in the boarding houses and hotels of downtown Kalamazoo became something more than rest. They became invention sessions. George would toss an idea across the table. The boys would pick it apart, improve it, and prototype it. It was in one of those sessions that Alfred conceived of a photographic burnishing machine, and in another, an on-demand water heater, a small unit that could hang above a sink and deliver hot water the instant you needed it, heated by gas. In 1886, George Humphrey founded Humphrey Manufacturing and Plating Company on North Burdick Street. Alfred, Frederick, and Herbert each found their footing there. Alfred perfecting the gas arc lamp, Herbert refining the water heater, Frederick inventing a hydraulic water lift pump. The three-story brick factory they eventually built on North Rose Street became a laboratory for an entire family of inventors. Charles, the third brother, did not live to see it. He died in 1888, at just 26 years old, and his photograph still hangs in our building today, alongside his brothers, a reminder of how close the whole story came to never happening at all. Alfred Henry Humphrey incorporated the General Gas Light Company in April of 1901 with $80,000 in capital and 25 employees. But he did not build it from nothing. He built it from 60 years of family sacrifice, hard travel, evening conversations around a table, the quiet labor of women who kept a family whole across thousands of miles, and the stubborn, inventive spirit of a father who believed his sons were capable of something extraordinary. That is where this company really begins. Not in 1901, but in two sisters who promised to stick together, and a family that spent a generation making good on that promise. (1901 to 1930). The spark of an idea. There is a moment in every great company's story where everything begins with one person, one idea, and the courage to walk out the door and build something from nothing. For us, that moment came in 1901, right here in Kalamazoo, Michigan. A young inventor named Alfred Henry Humphrey left Humphrey Manufacturing and Plating Company, a business that bore his own family name, to start something entirely his own. He set up shop at the corner of Rose and Water Streets in the shadow of what is today the Radisson Plaza Hotel, and he called his new venture the General Gas Light Company. Alfred's first invention was the inverted arc gas light. Now, that might not sound like a revolution, but consider the world as it was in 1901. Gas lights existed, but they burned upward, projecting their glow into the sky rather than onto the surfaces where people actually lived and worked. Alfred turned that idea on its head, quite literally. His inverted mantle directed brilliant, shadowless light downward, onto dinner tables, onto city sidewalks, into the corners of a room. It was a simple insight, but it changed everything about how gaslighting worked. The response was immediate. Sales skyrocketed. Within just a few years, General Gas Light boasted millions of lights installed in American homes, businesses, and along city streets. Every single year for the first 15 years was better than the year before. The company invested in key suppliers, including the purchase of the General Gas Mantle Company in New Jersey, and built a distribution network that stretched across the country. But Alfred was watching something else take shape, something that would eventually threaten everything he had built. Thomas Edison had invented the electric light bulb back in 1879, and, while it was still dim and unreliable in those early years, prone to flicker, prone to outage electricity was improving. The national power grid was slowly, steadily, inexorably spreading across America. Alfred could read the writing on the wall. He needed the next great invention. And in 1916, he found it, the radiant fire. The radiant fire was a gas-fired fireplace insert that replaced the mess of wood and coal with something clean, elegant, and instant. No smoke, no ash, no waiting, just warmth on demand. It was, in many ways, an even more inspired invention than the arc gas light. It would take $500,000 to tool and prepare it for the mass market, a staggering investment for its day. But then the world intervened. World War I broke out, and the United States entered the conflict in 1917. Employees were called to duty. Coal, the very resource that fueled gas production, was diverted to the war effort. The radiant fire launch would have to wait. General Gaslight held on, tightened its belt, and when the war ended in 1919, they finally brought the radiant fire to market. Once again, an instant success. And from that one idea on demand heat sprang a remarkable wave of invention. A gas-fired rotisserie for home and restaurant kitchens, liquid propane gas lights. And by 1930, what may have been the most commercially significant of all, the first overhead space heater, a forced air unit that hung from the ceiling and freed up the precious floor space of factories, retail stores, and warehouses across the country. It became a standard for industrial and commercial heating throughout the United States and Europe. Alfred himself relocated to New York in 1904 to manage the company's eastern operations, and he remained the company's chairman until his death in 1932. His sons Harold and later Hubert would carry on the presidency he had established. In just 30 years, this company had gone from one man with an idea about how to light a room to a multi-product manufacturer heating and illuminating homes, businesses, and factories across the nation. That is the legacy Alfred Henry Humphrey left us. Not just great products, but a way of thinking. See what others miss. Solve what others tolerate. Build for the future, even when the present is uncertain. That spirit has never left this company, and it never will. (1931 to 1960). War, reinvention, and a fateful gamble. We ended our last chapter with General Gaslight Company riding a wave of innovation, heating homes and businesses with the radiant fire, lighting rural cabins and campsites with LP gas lights, and filling factory floors across America with their ceiling-hung space heaters. It was a company in full stride. But the next 30 years would test everything that company was made of. Through the 1930s, business remained strong. The radiant fire was a beloved fixture in American homes, available in a wide array of elegant styles. The LP gas light found a loyal and growing market in rural communities, camping trailers, and recreational vehicles, places where electricity simply hadn't arrived yet. And new heating products, wall heaters, heat towers, gas furnaces, kept the company growing even as the Great Depression reshaped the broader economy. Then came December 7th, 1941. Like virtually every American manufacturer, General Gas Light Company turned itself inside out to support the war effort. From early 1943 through the end of World War II, the company had nearly ceased all commercial production. Their advertising during those years carried a simple, proud declaration. Today we produce tools for war. Tomorrow we will build for the comforts of peace. And they meant it. The company's machinists and engineers bid on and produced parts for precision gun sights, traversing mechanisms for tanks and artillery, components for armored vehicles, bilge pumps and valves for amphibious craft, recoil receivers, and fuel tank jettison release mechanisms for military aircraft. It was demanding, exacting work, and they were good at it. After the war, the Cold War kept defense contracts flowing through the late 1950s. But something was wrong. The commercial business they had returned to, home heating in particular, had become brutally competitive. The post-war baby boom sent millions of young families into new homes, and it seemed like 1,000 other companies saw the same opportunity in central heating that General Gas Light had prior to the war. Prices collapsed. Margins followed. By the late 1950s, the company was recording net losses. The defense contracts were sporadic and unprofitable. The Radiant Fire was at the end of its commercial life. The company found itself searching, honestly, urgently searching, for a new direction. They tried a backyard grill, camping equipment, a portable water pump. None of it was the answer. Then, in 1955, Providence walked through the front door in the form of a man named Ralph Cooksley. Ralph arrived with designs and patents for something called a diaphragm poppet valve, a pneumatic component unlike anything on the market. At a time when most pneumatic valves relied on sliding seals that required lubrication and were vulnerable to moisture and contaminants in compressed air lines, Ralph's design used a flexible diaphragm and a simple poppet. Without sliding seals, it didn't need lubrication. It tolerated the dirty, wet air found in poorly maintained systems. It just worked, reliably, every time. After building and testing a few prototypes, the leadership of General Gas Light Company made a decision that would define the next century of this business. They bought Ralph Cooksley's patents. They sold the heating business. They walked away from government contracts. They left their tired downtown manufacturing facility and moved 35 employees to a brand-new 20,000-square-foot building at the corner of Kilgore and Sprinkle Road, right where we still stand today. The LP gas light would fund the transition. The pneumatic valve would either make them or break them. Alf Humphrey, Bob Humphrey, and Bill Jackson placed that bet in 1960. They renamed the company Humphrey Products, and the rest, as they say, is history. It was, without question, the most consequential decision in this company's first 60 years. A small team, a modest building, a unique valve, and an unshakable belief that they had found something genuinely special. They had. (1960 to 1990). The pneumatic era. When we left our last chapter, 35 employees had just moved into a new building at Kilgore and Sprinkle. A bold bet on a new product in a young industry. The LP gas light would keep the lights on. The diaphragm poppet valve would determine whether there was a future. There was a future, and it was extraordinary. Within just 2 years of that move, sales of the new pneumatic valve outpaced the gaslight. It would take 5 years to surpass them in profitability, but the trajectory was unmistakable. The world was automating its factories, and Humphrey Products had exactly what those factories needed. Here is why the diaphragm poppet valve mattered so much. At the time, most pneumatic valves used sliding seals that required constant lubrication. Industrial air systems were often contaminated with moisture and pipe scale. When lubrication was washed away, conventional valves became sluggish, or they stopped working altogether. Equipment manufacturers couldn't rely on their customers to maintain a perfect air supply. The Humphrey valve didn't care. No lubrication required, moisture tolerant, contaminant resistant. It simply worked, day after day. In the real-world conditions of real factories, equipment makers built it in, distributors staked their reputation on it, and Humphrey grew. In 1961, they added a solenoid operator, allowing the valve to be triggered electrically. And from that came the 062E1, a tiny direct-acting solenoid valve that, in the words of those who were there, took the market by storm. A 4-way version followed. Then, a larger one, 25 series. The Dynamite family was born. Distributor agreements reached across nearly every state and into industrialized markets around the world. And in 1962, a Japanese company named Kogane Corporation came to America in search of the best pneumatic control valve they could find. They chose Humphrey. For the next 2 decades, Kogane would distribute and then license Humphrey's designs across Asia. To this day, Kogane credits the Dynamite 062E1 as the valve that launched their pneumatic business. Through the 1960s and 1970s, Humphrey engineers partnered with a local manufacturer on a pneumatic truck transmission shifting system, a relationship that would span nearly 60 years. They developed the TAC series of AirLogic valves and trained distributors across the country on how to design pneumatic control circuits before the age of the programmable logic controller. They were not just selling components. They were teaching an industry. In 1976, they entered the pneumatic cylinder business, acquiring a company called STARS, quickly redesigning and improving the product with patented features that clearly differentiated it from the competition. Then came the semiconductor revolution. By the late 1970s, the electronics industry was building the first generation of silicon wafer processing tools to manufacture semiconductor chips. These were demanding, high-precision machines, and they required small, reliable, clean solenoid valves. Humphrey's new Mini-Mite series was exactly the right product at exactly the right moment. It became the industry standard for first-generation wafer processing equipment. In 1982, the Mini-Miser took that a step further, introducing the lowest power-consuming solenoid valve on the market at just 1/2 watt. As PLCs and computer controls began interfacing with pneumatic systems, low power draw was not a luxury. It was a requirement. Humphrey delivered. By the late 1980s, the company had built one of the strongest pneumatic valve distribution networks in the country. The 310 and 410 valve series of 1989. The 4th generation of Humphrey's direct-acting solenoid valves capped a remarkable 30-year run of product innovation. And the industry had been transformed. Pneumatics had evolved from simple compressed air actuation into a core technology of modern factory automation, sequenced by PLCs, integrated with electronics, deployed in automotive plants, semiconductor fabs, packaging lines, and medical equipment across the globe. Humphrey Products had helped build that world. And in many ways, they had defined it. The question entering the 1990s was, what would the next chapter look like? (1991 to today). Engineering Solutions for Life. As we closed the last chapter, Humphrey Products had spent 30 years becoming one of the most respected names in pneumatic valve control, a company whose products were in factories, semiconductor fabs, and automation systems across the globe. The question entering the 1990s was what the next chapter would look like. The answer would require more reinvention than anyone might have anticipated, and it would lead us somewhere remarkable. The early 1990s brought a new competitive reality. Global manufacturers SMC, Festo, Parker, Norgren had entered the North American market with direct sales forces and complete product portfolios. The distribution model that had served Humphrey so well for 30 years was under real pressure. Distributors were being cut out of large accounts by direct sales. Traditional competitors were being acquired by larger firms. Humphrey responded with two strategic moves. First, they deepened their long-standing partnership with Kogani Corporation, a relationship that had endured since 1962 by securing North American marketing and manufacturing rights for Kogani's pneumatic products. 28 valves, actuator, and accessory products were introduced under the Humphrey brand. The H-Series, in particular, found remarkable success in silicon wafer processing tools for semiconductor chip manufacturing, where Humphrey's reputation and distribution network gave them a significant advantage over global competitors who had not yet established the same footprint. Second, and perhaps more consequentially, was the formation of the Da Vinci team. Da Vinci was a dedicated team of engineers, salespeople, and managers built around a single idea. Rather than selling standard catalog components, design and deliver complete pneumatic and fluid handling systems tailored to the specific needs of large OEM customers. Where standard products fell short, Da Vinci would build something better. The value proposition was simple and powerful. Let your customers focus on their core technology while Humphrey's experts handled the fluid handling and pneumatic systems. Da Vinci re-established Humphrey's presence in oxygen therapy. It opened the door into zero-pressure accumulation conveyors for material handling. It deepened relationships in analytical instrumentation. It was, in retrospect, the seed of what this company would ultimately become. In 1994, Humphrey made another pivotal decision, selling the LP Gaslight product line to BP Products. The Gaslight had been the company's heritage product since 1901, but Humphrey Products was now, unambiguously and completely, a pneumatic components and systems company. By 2015, the world had changed again. The H-Series had peaked. The pneumatic cylinder business was in decline. Global competitors with far larger portfolios were pressing hard. Once again, as they had in 1955, as they had in 1960, as they had throughout this company's history, the leadership of Humphrey Products made a bold strategic choice. They sold the cylinder product line to Fabco Air. They returned the H-Series marketing rights to Kogani. They acquired the medical valve product line from Curtiss-Wright, a portfolio that immediately broadened their capabilities in liquid handling, kidney dialysis, patient ventilation, slide staining, and analytical instrumentation. And they launched what is now known as the Life Science Group. The roots of that group actually trace back to the 1980s, when Humphrey first supplied pneumatic valves for oxygen concentrator systems. Work that began with the industry leader and quietly established Humphrey as a trusted partner in medical applications. That early credibility, built product by product over decades, made everything that followed possible. Today, the Life Science Group represents approximately 45% of Humphrey Products' total revenue, and it is growing. The structural advantages are compelling. Once qualified in a medical device, product life cycles can extend 15 years or more. Long production runs generate sustained annual revenue with minimal incremental engineering cost, and the profitability of life science applications consistently exceeds what traditional industrial markets offer. Our valve platforms, the CSV series cartridge solenoid, the 101 IDP miniature valve, the MIDP stepper motor-driven proportional liquid valve, and our expanding stainless steel diaphragm poppet valve family reflect both where we came from and where we are going. Many of these products trace their lineage directly to the diaphragm poppet concept that Ralph Cooksley walked through our door with in 1955. Some things never change. The insight, the craftsmanship, the commitment to solving problems that others can't. 125 years ago, a man named Alfred Henry Humphrey left a comfortable situation to build something from nothing, driven by an idea and an absolute belief that he could make something better. That spirit has lived in this building and in the people who work here, across 5 generations of family ownership. We have lit America's streets. We have heated its homes. We have helped build its factories. We have equipped its semiconductor fabs. And today, we are helping patients breathe, helping clinicians diagnose, and helping medical device manufacturers bring life-saving technology to the world. That is 125 years of Humphrey Products Company. And we are just getting started.